This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone. Since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party, they had tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This bummed out my brother and I because we had had plans to go out trick-or-treating with a few of our friends. Our parents had told us that we were way too old to be out trick-or-treating, and that instead we could invite friends over to the house to hang out with. My friends all declined, and that was because they were all out trick-or-treating, so this left me and my brother home alone handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10, almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we were going to eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch watching a scary movie, stuffing our faces with candy when there was suddenly a knock at the door. I stormed off the couch, wondering who the hell could be knocking on the door this late. I assumed it was just some late night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light off and all the decorations. It should have been a clear indication that we weren't giving out candy, so I thought this was probably just our parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it really difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face that I could spot was his beard. There was no way that this guy was actually a trick-or-treater because he wasn't wearing anything. Looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open the door, and was shaking a bit. It wasn't even cold outside, definitely not cold enough for somebody to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe. I wanted to get rid of him ASAP. "We're out of candy," I just shouted. I watched as a smile come across his face. It wasn't a friendly smile either. "Are you alone in there?" the guy asked us, almost in a mocking voice. "Should I call the police?" my brother said to me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a grumble and said, "Sounds like you're alone in there." I continued to watch him look through the peephole. His hands were welded tightly in his pockets and he was shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could. "Get the hell away from our house now, or I'm going to call the police." His smile faded and I could see all of his bare teeth. His teeth were really yellow. I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. Now I'm almost certain that when I said this he believed it because he instantly went away. I watched him through the peephole, which didn't really make sense because he was so eager to get in. Me and my brother were very relieved. We decided not to call the police. My brother and I were a bit paranoid though and watched some TV until our parents come home. We didn't tell them about the man since he hadn't actually tried to harm us. This is the thing that makes me hate not calling the police. We would have stopped a murder. You see, the next day we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbour had been found lying on the porch covered in blood. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done this and told the police. Now the thing was, they couldn't really do much because we didn't give them enough information on the details of his face and whatnot. They went on a manhunt but never found him, and I blame myself for the old lady's murder. I could have easily prevented this just by calling the police. I really think that the most disturbing fact of all is the fact that he didn't even take anything from the house. He literally just wanted to kill somebody. When I was a young child, I would always go out trick-or-treating on Halloween. As I got a bit older, I started going out with my friends doing this. Now where I lived there were some abandoned houses and we had to be careful not to go to them. On this one night in particular, we had raided as many houses as we could to get candy off of the owners, and there was this one house left. I didn't feel like I had enough candy and I decided to go up to there. All of my friends were too scared to go with me. Now I knocked on the door and I didn't get a reply. I looked back and my friends were nervously laughing, saying that make sure the ghosts don't answer. I knocked on it again and still there was no reply. I then shouted out, "Can't you just open the stupid door and give me candy?" I then was halfway to walking up to where my friends were, and the door immediately swung open with such force that it caused the door frame to break a little bit. We all ran back but retreated just enough to see who it was. As we looked back, we couldn't see anybody. We were half expecting to be chased out there. After pondering what to do for a few minutes, we decided to go and venture inside with all of us. We thought we'd have safety in numbers. As we got in there, this is probably what was most terrifying. There was literally no one. There was just the 2 glass windows at the front, and the rest of it had all been cleared out and was completely empty. There wasn't anywhere that anybody could run or hide. It was just literally completely empty. What's worse is we knew nobody had escaped because we would obviously have seen them. How on earth did whatever that was open the door with such force that it actually broke past the door frame? It's needless to say that all of us ran for our lives and never went back there. The place has now been demolished and we never know what actually happened that night. Halloween is my favourite holiday, not was, is. Despite the events that unfolded one crisp Halloween's Eve when I was about 16. At the time I lived with my parents, younger brother, older stepbrother and cousin in a big but old house that sat in a cul-de-sac close to Maine. Behind it ran an alleyway flanked by apartments, and it had a huge yard that my basement bedroom looked out upon. We lived in a small town. Crime seemed very minimal. I'd made my way out that Halloween night with the happiest of feelings for the best day of the year. It wasn't just what happened that night though. It was, of course, what came after, one small incident that come before. A few days before Halloween, my stepbrother and cousin arrived to discover a pickup truck full of dudes taking pictures of our house. Weird, but when approached, they seemed pretty friendly and complimented our Halloween setup. To be fair, it's pretty great. The men then sped off without incident and were quickly forgotten. My stepbrother and cousin both re-entered the story Halloween night, the big event itself, at about 3 AM. Both had been out drinking with their friends, and as such, both had left their respective vehicles and braved the icy walk on their own. Cousin arrived home first, but couldn't seem to get his keys to unlock the door, so he just sat on the porch and waited for my stepbrother. He showed up about half an hour later. He joked around with my cousin for not being able to unlock the door. He then went to try for himself and had no luck. So they bit the bullet and called my mum, waking her up to let them in. She was of course unimpressed having to open the door for them idiots in this time of night, but she didn't buy their story about the wonky lock. They insisted though, and to shut them up she finally relented and tried the key. She too though couldn't get the key in the lock. Annoyed and now tired and just confused, she said that this is a problem that they're gonna solve tomorrow. One other person arrived home late that night. Me. Though I arrived much earlier than those two and was about in bed by around midnight, I woke up close to 1 AM, still tired. All I could feel was anxiety and I don't know why. At first I tried to tell myself that I'd just gotten a bit too into the holiday spirit and had scared myself. But then, I noticed there was a shadow. It was perfectly man-shaped and it was cast upon my window. I then turned on my bedside lamp, blinked, and it was gone. It wasn't unusual, mind you, to see the shadows of people harmlessly walking through the alley, and I told myself that's all that there was to it. Then, thereafter, this is what happened. I came home from school the next day. My parents were there, so was also a locksmith and the police. My parents were there because, well, that's where they lived. The locksmith because my mum had to call him. The police had been called to deal with the confusion as to why there was a knife in the lock. I was relieved to see that it was the only place that part of the knife had ended up, though they'd also found some slash marks at the bottom of our garage, on our screens on our windows, and one at the bottom of my bedroom. Somebody was seriously trying to get in and harm us. I'm just thankful that they stopped at the door and it wasn't one of us that ended up getting it. I'm a 14-year-old girl and I, like the majority of teenagers, enjoy being home alone. My dad works from home, so very rarely does this happen, but when the opportunity arises, I take it. Okay, so one day, both my parents decide to take my brother to chess class and then go to the shopping mall. They ask if I wanted to come, but I rejected because I would much rather be there eating Halloween candy and watching TV. They did try and make me go, but I said that I was going to stay inside. In the end, I wished that I'd actually went. So I sat indoors for a few hours apiece with a mountain of Twix and Kit Kats just on the floor next to me. After quite a few episodes, all the candy was gone and I was just left with lots of wrappers. By this point in time it was 6:30, dark enough to basically be the middle of the night. I wasn't exactly comfortable to go outside in the dark, especially when the house next to me hasn't had anybody in it for years. This means that the bank people are constantly walking around it. However, the garbage bin is right next to the garage door and I can get outside and back and forth in about 5 seconds. I had all this candy that I had to throw away, so I decided that I'm gonna risk it. I went outside and threw the trash away. As I was turning to go back inside, I see a man walking by. This isn't really uncommon as I live in a busy street and live in an upper middle class area, so there's not much crime and people go walking at night all the time. I thought it was kind of weird that he was wearing all black because normally people want to be seen in the dark as to not be hit by cars. He was on his phone and didn't even look up at me, which I was thankful for because I was wearing a nightgown and my hair was a mess. I ran back inside and hit the button to close the garage. As the garage door was slowly coming down, the guy raced inside. I was in shock. I just stared at him. We made eye contact. He didn't have crazy eyes or anything, he actually looked normal. The garage door shut and he smiled at me. I shrieked and slammed the door that led into the garage and locked it. He then started to yell at me that he just wanted to be friends with me. Yeah, creepy guy, I'm home alone and I'm really going to be friends with you who's just literally ran into my garage. So I almost immediately called my parents. I probably should have called the police, but I didn't want to have them to come home and have this strange man jump out and attack them or something. They didn't pick up, of course. I texted them frantically, then called 911 who said they'd send out a squad car. The next 10 minutes were probably the most scary moments of my life. The operator stayed on the phone with me and told me not to go outside in case anybody else was out there. I could hear him in the garage. He didn't try and break the door down or anything, instead he just scratched it and giggled. He was trying to open the doorknob now, and he called for me to open the door, which was probably scarier than if he actually tried to break it down. I heard the garage door open and close and the police come in. The guy was outside sitting in front of the garage and the empty houses next door. He said since he was a landscaper he just wanted to talk with me and that we had spoken before and were actually friends. I was basically hysterical by now. I couldn't even put coherent sentences together. The cops did arrest him and my parents then come home. They saw I was a riot and then seemed more concerned about the car that was in the garage than me. By this point in my life, I was way too old to be out trick-or-treating. I was a fully grown adult who'd just moved out into their new house, but that didn't mean that I didn't like giving out candy. But all of this changed about 2 years ago. I got lots of trick-or-treaters at Halloween night and I thought it was normal and actually quite enjoyed seeing kids' faces light up when I given them candy. There was one person, however, who was really weird. I could see them from my window before they actually rang my doorbell. They were kinda lingering around for a while and I thought they were nervous. It was hard to see because they're dressed in all black. I just went to sit down and expected them to go away, but about a minute later they actually knocked on my door. Thing was, when I opened it, there was somebody with a gun there demanding to hand over all the money in the house and that I wouldn't get killed this way. I escaped with my life, but I'm never gonna be the same. When I was 12 and my oldest younger sister was 10, my dad was in the military and we lived on a base. It was around Halloween and I was walking towards my friend's house to do skateboarding. Between two of the buildings, I spotted a creeper in a Michael Myers mask. He receded into the shadows when I saw him, and at the moment I was just thinking, oh, whatever. I actually saw the same guy the next morning, while waiting for the bus, where all the other kids thought I was trying to scare them because he'd actually hidden behind a building. I was actually getting creeped out at this point, but I never bothered pressing the issue. On Halloween, my sister and I went out trick-or-treating, and I saw this guy dressed as Michael Myers following us between the houses all night. Now that night, my sister came into my room and said that we have a problem. I went into her room and the Michael Myers creep was standing in our backyard just staring up at our window. We then got our parents and he just jittered when they got there. This is a really scary part though. About a week later, somebody tried to kidnap my sister while she was walking home from school. We have no idea if this was related, but by God did it unsettle us. To start out, this story takes place on and off again throughout most of my life. It starts out as a typical, my parents got a divorce when I was younger situation, but unfolded into much more. In fact, I'm still picking up the pieces of what happened. As it stands now, my father is dead. It was a ruled suicide, but I think that was only half of what happened. I'll talk about everything that led up to this, but more importantly, I believe that Mary definitely had a lead in all of this, or at least something to do with it. I don't know, I'll explain more now. My mother and father divorced when I was around 4. Almost everybody I know has gone through some kind of similar situation. I have 2 brothers, one older and one younger. We saw him about every other weekend and he paid the child support, you get the gist. One weekend visit, my father introduces this woman that he's seeing named Mary. Her eyes and hair are dark, her skin is pale, she had an obsession with the colour red. Something was off to me. I didn't know what it was, it really creeped me out. I didn't know it at the time, but Mary is one of the main reasons my parents got divorced. My father cheated on my mother with her. He met her while he was working as a waiter at a Red Lobster. Mary followed my dad everywhere. They got married pretty quickly and my mother and father divorced. I never knew that there was a wedding until later. My mum hated her, but she never badmouthed my father or Mary in front of my brothers and I. She felt it was important for us to not judge others, even if this woman was part of the reason that my mum and dad weren't together anymore. We continued to visit my dad and Mary's house though. I always associated the house with red. The house was always decorated with strawberries and stuff like that. It was kinda weird. Now Mary was just unnecessary drama for a while. Things like buying us toys that would keep us only at my dad and Mary's house, or saying that she wanted my father to have custody of us. I felt like these were harmless in a way. Every divorcing couple probably has this variation. Things carried on like this for a couple of years. Now I knew something wasn't right when I was about 7 or 8. I remembered the incident that confirmed this to me. My little brother was a super curious child when he was about 4. He had scooted a dining table chair from the fridge to go and get a cereal box on top. And when he reached for the top, he pulled down a handgun instead of a cereal box. I panicked and got my dad, who acted really funny about it. My memory is fuzzy, but I remember going home early that weekend and my dad didn't know that there was a gun at Mary's house. It was at this point that my mum started to have trouble with us going over there. My father got worse about being able to come and pick us up. He was very unreliable for the most part to begin with. I know that he got about 10 times worse though whenever he was around Mary. My mum told me later when I was much older that Mary called our house around this time of the gun incident and said, "I want your life." My mother is a really tough lady. She grew up in East LA in California, and even this scared her. So she decided to go and get a restraining order. I'm guessing that Mary just wanted my mum's stability. Even as a single mum with 3 kids, she was doing very well for herself and even dating. But even so, how long had she obsessed with my mum before this, and what did it mean? Not long after the phone call, my mum heard her car being smashed into one night. Somebody had taken a brick and smashed a driver's side window. Nothing was taken. I knew it was Mary. We had no way to prove it, but it was obvious. My dad and Mary had a baby. Her name is Madison. I only remembered holding her for a little while. I can't imagine all the stuff that she's been through. My mum met and married my stepdad pretty soon after that, and they decided it would be best for me to move to Florida. We had other family there, and there weren't many jobs where I was living in Tennessee. I don't remember any problems at all when we were so far from my dad and Mary. We stayed about a year, then moved back to Tennessee. My stepdad was able to get a better job again, and we were closer to my mum's parents. That's when the phone calls started. As soon as we moved back, we would get phone calls where somebody would just listen for a few minutes and then hang up. The numbers were always blocked, but I'm sure it was her. Now these calls would actually continue for years. It became an inside joke. We all knew who it was, but there wasn't anything we could do. My dad denied it. Anytime I asked him about it, he took her aside. Well, things fell into this weird moment where my mum was a bad guy. Anytime I questioned my dad and Mary's behaviour, where that my mum was putting it up on me. Things escalated one night when my dad come to pick us up after a visit. My mum and Mary actually ended up getting into a big fist fight or something. It was weird. Mary actually swung for my mum and punched her so hard that she fell backwards. My brothers and I watched from the apartment where we lived at the time. My mum immediately called the police, but Mary was never investigated, and my mum didn't bother pressing any charges even after she got a case later. We ended up moving into a big house a while after that, where we still are today. Dad and Mary started to have problems and split up. I thought that maybe she would be gone for good, or at least gone for the most part, but she never really went away. My dad started to become a person that we would somewhat rely on again when she was gone. I got to know my little sister more and things were okay. She started coming around again though. Whenever she was with my dad in front of us, she would whisper in his ear. My dad would drink more and he'd become physically ill looking and would start to gain weight. We could tell when Mary was around because the difference was so drastic. He even officially divorced her at one point, but it was obvious that they were still going on and off together. My brothers and I went to live our lives and we become too old for visiting the way we were. Whole weekend visits become just going to see my dad for an evening. The whole time, however, the phone calls never stopped. They aren't as frequent, but they were there in the background, like a reminder that she was always lurking. When I got into high school, visits from my dad about stopped altogether. Now it was actually pretty common to go a while without seeing or hearing from my dad. And with Mary, she was gone, I thought. I hadn't seen her in years. I never saw her anywhere at all. The phone calls had actually stopped, but we had just got rid of the house phone. I was a freshman in college and I remembered it being right around the Halloween of 2009. I was shopping with my aunt for some cheap decorations at a Walmart by my house. I saw a woman walking slowly behind us and my aunt and I both did a double take. It was Mary. She was totally following us around the store. She looked like she was maybe 50 years older than when I last saw her, and her clothes were terrible. My aunt kept elbowing me to go and talk to her because we weren't exactly sure if it was her. It could have been somebody who looked like her, right? I suddenly managed to get the nerve to say, "Is your name Mary?" "Yeah, it is. Are you Samantha? How are you?" Using my name like that really caught me off guard. She knew who I was and wasn't bothering to talk to me till then. She didn't even act like she was being cool. I asked her if she had spoke to my dad lately because it's been a while since I'd heard from him. She swore up and down that she hadn't spoke to him for months, which I later found out was a lie. This was at the beginning of my dad's going missing. After I saw her, something happened and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what happened before he disappeared completely. His cell phone was shut off, and when I called his work at the casino where he'd been working for over 15 years, they said that he was no longer working there and they couldn't say why. My mum and brothers had actually filed a missing persons report. We didn't have to wait because it was already several months since he'd been missing. They helped us make a flyer and looked all over. Everything would just lead back to Mary though. I mean literally everything. It was about mid-November when we started talking to her. My mum and I called Mary and she told me that she had in fact seen my dad one night after Halloween. Mary told us that he was making a noose and that this would be the last time that anybody ever saw him. We honestly didn't want to believe that. My dad was an alcoholic. It wasn't uncommon for him to say such drastic stuff, but he never considered suicide. We told the detectives that Mary told us this and that they had her come in for questioning. She told the detectives a complete different story and kept changing the dates. There wasn't any evidence of anything though, so we couldn't do much. The detectives did, however, tell us that we shouldn't talk to her anymore and said that they don't know what she's capable of. Things went on like this until they found him on January 4th, 2010. He was found dead in a storage unit. He had his car pulled in, shut the unit door and let it run until he died. He had been there for 63 days. There were several notes, all dated from November 2nd, one from my mum, one for each of his children, but there was an especially long note for Mary, where he dotted on her and spoke about how wonderful she was. The suicide note even said for her to take any insurance money and use it all on herself. The dates on the note were also very close to the time when Mary said she had seen him. There was a million things that could have happened, but I know that she had something to do with it. Even if my dad did actually kill himself, I know that she helped push him over the edge. I'm not one to just blame somebody. I know my father was a troubled man, an alcoholic, but there's something frustrating and absolutely horrendous about this woman, but there's zero evidence against her. Now, she wasn't actually allowed to come to the funeral. My mum and parts of his family put everything together. There wasn't anybody he knew that hadn't heard of her. Everybody felt that she was a bad woman. Now, I actually found a profile of hers months after they found my dad dead. There are only 5 or 6 photos of her and some guy obviously happy. They're all dated from January the 4th, 2010. The next year on January 4th, 2011, she showed up at the family's house. We didn't let her in the house and she kept saying something about having stuff from my dad's in her car that she needed to let us have. We told her to leave and that we were going to call the police. That night, somebody put red tissue paper in and around the mailbox. Even the next year, 2012, she called my mum and asked to meet her in some burger parking lot. She said she had some more of my dad's stuff to give us. My mum made my stepdad go instead of her, but she never showed. I feel like she wanted to do something bad to my mum. The next year, we didn't hear from her. I did some research and it turns out that she was put in jail for making meth. It made a lot of sense for some things, but I still have more questions than I do answers. It was around Halloween a couple of years back, and some friends and I were watching a TV show about the scariest movie moments. When the show ended, we decided to share some true stories that we had. This story is what my friend shared and it still creeps me out. When my friend's dad was younger, her family was really poor and a lot of times they would actually have to go dumpster diving to try and get some food to eat. Well, one time, they were in a pretty affluent neighbourhood and opened a trash can to find a bunch of mutilated dogs and cats inside. This really scared him, so he naturally ran away. Well, a couple of weeks later, he went back to that neighbourhood and was walking around when he saw a man standing outside his garage. The man saw him and pushed his automatic garage door open whilst telling him that he had a really nice shiny new bike for him just waiting in the garage. My friend's dad started walking towards the door, but then remembered the mutilated animals that they'd seen earlier and got scared. After my friend told me this story, she said that the guy turned out to be this huge serial killer. Apparently the shiny bike thing was actually a way that he could lure in victims. About 12 years ago when I was 22, I worked at a video store. It was about 5 days before Halloween and my manager asked me if I could work there since everybody else wanted off. Being the good employee that I am, I asked if I could dress up. She agreed and said I could dress up as whatever I wanted. Can I dress up as a chick? I was actually joking until she thought that I wouldn't be brave enough to. Challenge accepted. I went out and brought a dress, a wig and some makeup, and I borrowed a bra from my current crazy girlfriend at the time. I did my makeup on the way, and I did actually look quite good as a girl. Now, I only lived about half a mile from the store, and since I was within walking distance to everything, I didn't see the need for a car at the time, so I started walking. I had to cross the street, so I walked under a bridge, cut through an abandoned parking lot through an alley, and I was there. It was dark outside, but I'd never had anybody else bother me during this walk before, so I felt pretty safe. About halfway across the bridge, I looked up to see a man in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, walking towards me. As I was walking, I realised that this guy was checking me out. I giggled a little bit and laughed at the thought because maybe I was a pretty hot chick. I walked past him and continued on my way. As I walked, I continued to let my mind wander into La La Land. At this point in time, I was walking through the parking lot. I suddenly heard that same guy shout out, "Hey girl," and I felt him try and grab